Hello and welcome to our last module and our last chapter for this class. It's actually, we go back a bit, back to chapter 9, but it is actually the discussion of our last stage or last function of the management process, which is the control. We've already looked at planning, which was what? It was identifying the objectives that we wanted to achieve and also identifying how we would go about achieving those objectives. That led us into organization, which was about creating structure, allocating resources, coordinating efforts. Leading was then next, and that had to do with motivating people and structures to act in ways that would help us to realize our objectives. And now we get to this last stage, which is the control process, the control of the actual organization, the control of the strategic implementation of the organization. So, what is controlling? Well, normally when you hear that term, it has somewhat of a bad connotation. We don't want to be controlled, and so if we hear someone's being controlled, we think that there's some kind of forceful demand or coercion placed upon them. But in terms of organization, controlling is a beneficial, a critical, and a necessary part of the entire management process. And what it is, it's the process of measuring performance and taking action to ensure desired results. You would recall that in the planning stage, we would have identified and stipulated some objectives or goals that we wanted to realize. We would have also determined how we wanted to achieve those goals. And when we created our structure and we incentivized or motivated people in our organization, we wanted them to follow the plan that we had created, that we had formulated, and to hopefully realize the objectives that we had identified. Well, controlling allows us to evaluate whether or not our plan is being carried out in the manner that we designated it to be, and whether or not that plan is realizing the objectives, achieving the goals that we wanted it to achieve. That's what we're doing in controlling. We're trying to ensure that the right things happen in the right way at the right time. So we're doing the right things in the right manner at the right appropriate time. And of course, one of the major benefits to controlling is that it helps us to, one, evaluate our system, ensure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and we're achieving our goals, but two, it gives us information that can help in terms of organizational learning, that can help us to even create better plans, better objectives, better structures, leading more effective ways in the future. And so here we see that, again, the relationship between all the four steps of the management process. We know what planning is, we know organizing, we know what leading, and lastly controlling, to ensure that our results are realized, to ensure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And if we're not, to take that corrective action. Different kinds of controls can be utilized by the firm. One type is what's called a feed-forward control. And what a feed-forward is that it's actually employed before a work activity begins. So this is control systems that we utilize before we actually start doing something. And so the goal is to solve problems before they occur. An example of a feed-forward control might be the choice or the employee recruitment that we use. We want to make sure that the people that we're employing are actually going to be effective once they start working for us. So we try to get the best people, the smartest or the most trained, the most effective people, and then put them into the system. That's a feed-forward control. We're trying to weed out ineffective people even before they get into the system. We're not waiting till they get into the system and then maybe try to train them out to correct their problems or their inaccuracies. No, we're trying to get the best people initially, and that's a feed forward control. So you're doing it before the work activity actually begins. Think of also about some raw materials or ingredients. You're choosing, let's say you have a restaurant, you're choosing the best chicken that you have even before you start the process of cooking it, getting it prepared, because you want to have the best ingredients. You want to solve the problem, you want to eradicate the problem. That's more preventative than it is reactive. But while the system is going on, you can also employ other types of controls, and these are called concurrent controls. And that's focusing on what happens during the process. So as the process is ongoing, you want to monitor it. You want to make sure that things are being done according to the plan, according to the steps or the activity that was prepared beforehand. And so, for example, let's say in an automobile manufacturing plant, as the machines are going on, you will see people that are continuously, and now more so computers do this, but before there would actually be people, and there still are people that go around and check that the system is working in order, that the things that are being created are the machines are calibrated well, that the parts are being made to the right size, in the right manner, that there are no hiccups, there are no bottlenecks in the production plant. What they're trying to do is to ensure that once the system is in motion, that it continues to stay in motion and there is a level of stability and certainty. And those are concurrent controls. And if something were to happen in the system, so for example, certain machines, if a bad or some kind of delay occurred, the machine would pick up on it, the computer would pick up on that, and that information would be relayed to someone, and that could be corrected to ensure that the system continues to operate successfully. And then the feedback controls, and this is kind of the one that we are most accustomed to. It's kind of the traditional way of doing control, is that once the work has been finished, you look at the end results and you try to solve problems after they've essentially occurred. So maybe you look at your end product and say, you know what, this wasn't made right. There's some kind of defect here, and it's okay, where did this occur? Let's see, let's go back, let's retrace our steps, and let's try to fix this so in the future this doesn't happen. Now, of course, there is some benefit to using feedback controls. You get that information at the final output, and that's useful to help you not make the mistake again. But unfortunately, you have already made the mistake, and that mistake is costly. That's inefficiency. So rather than wait till you have that end product, rather than wait even while the system is going on to try to fix it, the feed-forward control is trying to protect and trying to correct the problem before it happens is probably more effective. Prevention is better than a cure. And so rather than wait till the final analysis to not make mistakes in the future, you would try to not make mistakes even in the present. And so this is kind of how it looks illustrated here. Feed forward control, ensure the right directions are set, the right resources are available before we want to solve the problems. Concurrent, solve problems while they're occurring. While something is going wrong, you try to fix it before the process is ended. And feed forward, once the process is ended, you try to correct it for future iterations. Another way that we can look at control is from the perspective of internal and external. Internal controls have more to do with, and this has more, by the way, to do with people. In an internal control, people or motivated individuals demonstrate what's called self-discipline. So when you're internally controlled, you are basically the one that's disciplining your behavior. You're the one that is ensuring that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're realizing your objectives. In order for you to, for example, let's say be successful in graduate school or to do a doctorate degree, you have to have a lot of internal control. And the reason why is that you don't have professors, you don't have people that are continuously saying, okay, where's your assignment, where's your homework? Even for this, like an online class, for example, you don't have to show up every day for class. You can log on anytime and do your discussion forums and do your quizzes. I'm not there kind of monitoring, were you present, were you absent, that kind of deal in terms of actual physical class. So you have to have a certain level of self-discipline to keep yourself motivated and to do what you're expected to do, even without any kind of external monitoring. Okay, that's the internal control. But many times, even though people have internal control, we still utilize what's called external control. And that's where you have that personal supervision and formal administrative system. So for example, in a physical class, you come to class, we take a roll, you have that little, machine that you slide. Then I can also look and make sure that you're doing your homework, you're doing the assignments because you're there physically. That's external control. And of course, those two things can work in tandem. Internal control can help us in terms of keeping ourselves self-disciplined and motivated. External control can also help us in situations where we need to have a level of personal supervision. Another type of control can be bureaucratic control. Bureaucratic control. And what is that? That's kind of being influenced by authority, policies, procedures, job description, but it's a type of external control essentially. The first one here, self-control, is internal control. Again, that's where you self-discipline. Bureaucratic control is controlled by the environment or the administration. So you are coming to work on time at 8 o'clock because maybe you have to punch in physically. Or your job description dictates to you what specifically you have to do, how many hours you have to make, the types of roles that you have to play. That is a control mechanism. Even budgets can be controlled because they tell you what you can spend on certain things, what is allocated. That controls your behavior. And of course, day-to-day supervision, managers, leaders, monitoring your behavior, ensuring that you're doing what you're supposed to, walking in your office, making sure you're not playing Angry Birds. So that's bureaucratic control. And that's a formal type of external control. An informal type of external control is what we call clan control. And this is not control that comes necessarily from some formal administration, some policy, some kind of law. This comes more through the norms and the expectations of the people that you work with. So for example, let's say you work in an organization and you realize very early on that everybody kind of stays back past 5 o'clock. Although it says formally that you are allowed to leave at 5, nobody else in the office leaves. You might start thinking, you know what? I've got to work till past 5 o'clock here because everybody here expects that of me. That's the norm of this organization. And so you are then influenced to act in a certain way by that specific environmental condition. The same thing, let's say you start working somewhere and you ask them, do you have any kind of dress code here? And they say, no, you basically wear whatever you want to wear. And you start going to work and you realize if you're a guy, everybody's wearing suits, ladies, if everybody's wearing, formal pantsuits, and you say, you know what, that's what I have to look like because of the clan control. And the last type of control, it doesn't necessarily come from inside the organization or inside the person, but it comes more so from the market, from the competition, from the environment. Firms and organizations are influenced to behave a certain way based upon what their competitors are doing or what the customers require of them. So you'll see a lot of times firms adopt certain types of behaviors based upon what the competition will do. So Apple brings out a tablet, all of a sudden you see Samsung bringing out a tablet, Microsoft's working on that. It's because of that market control. The competition influences the behavior of the firm. The next couple of slides deal with a very important topic, and this is the steps in the control process. And it's pretty intuitive, pretty easy to understand, but they're all very, very critical steps, and you'll see how they interface or interrelate with each other. The first step in the control process is to establish objectives and standards. You want to establish objectives and standards. Basically, it's identifying what you want to achieve. And this would have probably been done in, again, the planning stage, okay? You have two types, if you will, of standards. You have your output standards, your output measures, and your input measures. The output measures, they measure things like the quantity, the quality, the cost, or the time. So it's once you've created a result, that's kind of what the output standards are. Here it is. I've sold 25 cars. I have this level, or I have, this level of defects in my production. It cost me this amount to produce this amount. I took this amount of time to make this product. All of these are output. They're results that have occurred once you perform the activity. Input standards are a little bit different, okay? They're kind of how did I go about creating or realizing those outputs. So they measure things like the amount of work that you utilize, right, in actually doing the production. So it's kind of measuring or evaluating the behavior and the processes that go into realizing those output standards. So you have your input standards and you have your output standards. So the first stage is to establish your standard. What do I want to achieve? What is the goals that I want to realize? The next step is to actually measure your performance. Now let's go back, if you will, to when we talked about in the planning process, I believe it was in chapter 8, about goal setting and then the importance of goals. And so goals, we said, have one of the characteristics of good goals was that they had to be accurate, and they had to, they had to be measurable. They had to be measurable. We wanted to be able to measure them. Why? Because it lets us know whether or not we have actually attained the goal. So in order for performance to be measured, our goals must be measurable. So we want to measure these goals, and we want to accurately measure them, because this is going to tell us, one, whether or not we have achieved our goals, or two, if we haven't achieved our goals, how far off are we and what necessarily do we need to do. So goal is accurate measurement. The goal of the actual measuring performance is to actually measure performance results and or performance efforts. So if we're measuring output or we're measuring input, it depends. Results or output, efforts or input. And then we can identify differences between the actual results, what we wanted to achieve or how we wanted to do this, and what we actually did. What did we see in reality? And once we see that, we can, you will see, make changes. Effective control, it says here, requires measurement. You can't just look at the system and say, well, you know, I think it's running okay. I think we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Or just kind of, you know, get a feeling that, well, you know, I think we're attaining our goals. I'm not 100% sure exactly how much, but I think we're getting there. No, you have to measure. You know, if you, for example, if you're evaluating customer satisfaction, you can't just walk in and say, you know, I think I've seen more customers smile today than I saw before. Well, yeah, that might be true, but how can you really measure customer smiles? I mean, there must be some way for you to evaluate it, and you, in order to allow you to compare it to what you want to realize. Once you get your actual performance, and of course you know what you wanted to achieve, you can compare both. You compare your objectives and standards with your actual performance results. And so what do? You look at the difference or the variance between the desired performance and the actual performance. You look at the difference between the desired performance and the actual performance, and you look for variation. Now I'll discuss this. Positive or negative variation. Negative variation is what we normally think about when we think about need for action. Okay, I wanted to achieve 2% growth. I actually only achieved 0.5% growth, so I need to do something. That's a negative variance. Desired performance was less than actual performance was less than desired performance. But there can be instances where we actually did better than what we wanted to achieve. And so what do we do then? Do we just say, oh wow, you know, this is great, this is a wonderful, we're superstars, let's not rock the boat? That's not necessarily true. If you see positive variance, meaning that you have done better than you expected, it could be, one, that your goals were not challenging enough, or two, that you were challenging and you did do a good job, but there's still need for improvement. There's still need for improvement. So you want to necessarily find ways to improve, even if you are doing better than what you desired. And as I said, looking at those variations, then take your corrective action. Taking action when a discrepancy exists, whether that discrepancy be positive or negative. Okay? Management by exception is one way of going about it, giving attention to situations showing the greatest need for action. So many times there are variances across multiple processes. Well, you may not be able to deal with all. So what you do is you look at the ones that have the greatest need, have the greatest variance, and those perhaps will give you the priority that you need in order to address that. And so you look at for example, the types of variances or types of exception. I said the one that we traditionally think about is a problem situation where we're not meeting our desired objectives. Of course, that's something that needs to be addressed. But there can be also what I said, opportunity situations where we have exceeded our desired objectives, and those then present us with opportunities for even greater improvement. Okay?